let's just tell them what we're going to do, and we'll take them out. If we're going out to a restaurant or something, we're
Right.
going to eat. Where do you guys want to go? You'll get 5 different choices.
Yep.
So, but that's important to her to try and give them some agency and empower them to make some choice. But
Well, they do have a choice of what they want at McDonald's.
right, exactly. Exactly.
Welcome to episode 284 of the Nacho Kids podcast. Today, we talk with Brian Peterson about financial planning for blended families. Yes, we recently had Michael Van Cleve talking about financial planning for blended families. But this is such an important topic that we want to have Brian share some more information. Before I forget, if you are in the Scottsdale, Arizona area, and if you'd like to do a meet and greet with David and myself on December the 7th, shoot me an email at Lori, Lori, at nachokids.com so I can keep you informed of where we will be. All right, let's get to listening. Today we have Brian Peterson. Hey, Brian Peterson, how are you?
I'm great, Lori. How are you doing?
Good. First of all, you are in a blended family.
I am.
And secondly, you are in financial planning.
Both are true.
Both are true. And recently we had Michael Van Cleve talking about financial planning in blended families.
Yes, I listened in on that podcast. That was a good one.
Yes. And the thing is, you can't have enough information, or you can't have too much information when you're in a blend regarding financial planning.
That's so true. And it's one of the things I love about it is that each blended family is very unique.
Yes.
We all come from a different set of circumstances, and when you're dealing, whether we like to admit it or not, a blended family is rising out of some sort of upheaval, right? At least one of the couple either had death or divorce in their family, if not both.
Mm-hmm.
And you go through that, you become independent again, and then you fall in love, remarry, you might be bringing kids together. There's just a lot of dynamics that come into that.
Right.
And money is just one of those things that can become a surface issue, if you don't deal with it head on. So
yeah. And like I was telling you before, David and I, after we talked to Michael Van Cleve, we were like, wait a minute, we haven't really addressed some of this stuff. And I know, honestly, I just figured this was David's house when we got married, that when I died or he died, whatever, that it would go to his kids. But I told you, David surprised me because he said, you've contributed to this home.
Right.
So Jackson should get something out of it. And I was like, that's awesome.
Right. That must have been very reassuring, right? A recognition of what you've done too.
Right.
And
recognition of my son.
Right.
Because my son's dad, he does have some land and a house. And honestly, I was like, I feel like crap. I don't have anything to leave my kid because this is David's house. This is David's family's land, all this stuff. So when he said that, it was like, yay, I'm a good mom again.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, but you've got to think about this stuff. And then you've got the complication of this being family land.
Right.
That adds a whole nother dynamic to it.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, because you have a lot of other outside forces that see it as family land.
Right. And two, if none of David's kids want to live here, then if the sister-in-law is still living next door, then she's probably going to want some say on who lives next door to her.
For sure.
So my advice is don't live on family land.
That would make that part simpler, right?
Yes, it would. It would. So tell us a little bit about your blend. And then we'll get back to the financial stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think I'll start back a little bit further, actually, because I grew up in a blended family.
Oh, yes. Go back.
My parents divorced when I was 5-ish. And actually, that was a second marriage for both of them.
Oh, really?
And then they have both since remarried and have both been in that relationship for 30 years or more. So I guess third time's a charm.
Yeah.
For them. And so I have 2 step parents as well. And I have half siblings from my parents' first marriage. I've got one full-blooded sibling, my younger sister. And so I just remember growing up, it was whenever, in school, they tell us about your family. It was, well, where do I begin?
Yeah.
It was a mess and it was confusing.
Yeah. And you're like, I don't need a family tree. I need a family forest.
Right. Exactly. And so I guess it was my wife, Kara, and I got engaged in 2019. And
Well, hang on a second, if you don't mind.
okay. Yeah. No. Hey, you're in charge.
Woohoo, I like that. Nobody ever tells me that. So, how old were you when your parents remarried?
Good question. Let's see. I want to say for my mom, I was around, I know I was older than that. I was 11, 12-ish.
Okay.
And then for my dad, I was a little bit older. He met my stepmom when I was in high school. And I think they got married my senior year, roughly.
Okay.
So I was, 17-ish,
Yeah.
18-ish. Yeah.
So, do you remember a lot of, well, who did you live with?
I lived with my mom, and then my sister and I would go to my dad's like every other weekend.
Yeah, the normal.
Yeah, well, at least
visitation.
while we were younger, and then when we got older and were driving or had activities and stuff, it became a little more flexible.
hmm So, your mom remarried, so you had a stepdad that was around you all the time, basically.
Correct. Yes.
Did he come in as a parent?
I would say no. I mean, there were some things that he just
Yeah,
didn't.
don't talk to your mom that way.
Yeah. The most memorable thing is when my older sister, she slammed her door in a huff. And he didn't react to her. He just took the door off. I just remember that as kind of funny, but of course I'm 5 years younger than her. So I was just a little brat.
Yeah.
So it was funny, but he's, and he's still alive, still around, big part of my life. And I mean, he's like a dad now, definitely been a mentor to me and has been a good example.
Oh, I love that.
Me trying to be a stepdad. He's just a very patient person. And yeah, I don't remember him ever coming in and ever having this domineering father figure, like I'm gonna be your dad sort of thing.
Right.
And I guess I always appreciated that because I was a stubborn kid, and I was young and it was confusing. And I pushed his limits, you know.
Yeah, and you had
And
been
he
by
was there
yourself.
patiently.
Yeah, and you had been there by yourself with your mom for so long.
And my
Yeah, your sister. Yeah.
Yeah,
But still, intruder. Well, I don't know. From a boy perspective, you're probably thinking, "Oh, thank God, somebody else to kill the spiders."
No, I never really thought that. Interesting. I had I don't even know if my parents know this, but my parents don't have a good relationship. I mean, they don't really see each other anymore.
Yeah.
But they never did. It was always awkward growing up, and when I had my own family and planning birthday parties for the kids or events for my kids. Oh boy, how's it gonna go when, mom and dad or grandma and grandpa come?
Right.
Are they gonna behave? And I mean, I don't think that's atypical, but I'll tell you most of the time they were fine. And
Right.
But you just as a child of divorce, you just never know.
Well,
Because
and
there's just more dynamics.
right. My son's father and I have never had a hair close to a decent co-parenting relationship. And I know it makes it awkward for my son.
For sure.
We're
Yeah.
cordial with each other. My son actually graduated high school and then not long after graduated with his 2-year degree because he did the dual enrollment classes with high school.
Yeah, my daughter did that. Yeah, that's
Yes.
great.
Isn't that awesome?
It is awesome.
So actually his girlfriend graduated with her 2-year before she graduated high school.
Nice.
Yeah. My son would have been able to do that if he would have listened to his mother, but that's okay. But we've had to be around his dad a lot because of these things. And we try to make it where Jackson doesn't have to do separate celebrations. And so we'll just say, okay, everybody, we're getting together for dinner to celebrate Jackson. Here's the information.
Yeah.
And we just don't really talk. There's no interaction whatsoever. But I still talk to the rest of his family,
Right. Yeah.
which, I think Jackson is, well, let me say Jackson, when Jackson was born, his dad and I were already split up. So he's never known us together.
Okay.
And it's always been awkward, even at drop-offs when he was 3, 4, 5 through 15, it's just always been awkward. But I told Jackson when he was little, I said, I want to tell you something. If you're playing basketball and your dad's on one side of the gym and I'm on the other, and the game's over, do not hesitate to go to your dad.
Oh, that's good advice.
I didn't want to see my child, and I can see it in my head, which is crazy, but I can see him standing there, and I get emotional about it, but I see him standing there like, where do I go? What do I do? Who's going to be mad at me if I do this? Kind of thing. And I'm like, I don't want you to go through that. You just go to your dad.
And that's such a blessing that you gave him. You gave him permission to, hey, it's your dad. It's okay.
Right.
Yeah.
But even with the grandkids now, my step grandkids, they were talking about a birthday party. Well, they're going to do one for mom's side of the family and one for David's side of the family. Just because it's too much to have everybody together.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, if that works for y'all, that's fine. I'm fine being around them, but I don't want them at my house.
Right. Sometimes the kids like that. Get a couple birthday parties.
Yeah, the Hours kid is like, why don't I get 2 Christmases? And why don't I get 2 birthdays?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm.
All right. So with your stepmom, you saw her every other weekend.
No,
that's right. He was older.
Not as much because, at that point we were, I was pretty independent, 16, 17-year-old. I still saw her a fair amount, but we never actually, well, I don't know. Is that true? Lived in the same house. Maybe we did.
For a week.
Yeah. I mean, I've been up to visit them. They live a few hours away now, but, it was obviously later in life, for me. So not as much time to bond and blend, although we still talk. She's great. I call her stepmom. She's my stepmom. She's not my dad's wife or anything like that. She is. She's
right.
But that's not what I call her. I think of her as a stepmom, and she's been a great influence to me and to my kids. She's been amazing with the grandkids, and she just loves to make time to see them. Now they're older. My kids are older, so they're, doing their own thing most of the time.
Right.
But
do you have grandkids yet?
No, I do not.
Oh,
no, all of our kids are still single, and we just have a couple that have graduated college, and we have a couple in college now.
Yeah, we don't want to rush them.
No, yeah. And then one high schooler. My youngest is still in high school. So.
And so you said you met your wife in 2019.
Yeah, we had actually.
Or you got engaged.
We got engaged in 2019. We got engaged after. Well, we had met online dating.
Which one?
eHarmony.
Okay.
And we met in person once or twice, and then it just weren't quite ready, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I gave her my number, and she reached out about a year later.
Oh, wow.
And then shortly thereafter, we started dating. And so I want to say we met maybe in she'll kill me for not knowing any of this, but
Don't let her listen to this.
2016, 17. So we dated, and then we really started dating early 2018. So we dated about a year and a half or so before we got engaged, and then got married. We were actually planning our wedding when COVID hit and everything started locking down. And so we had decided to just get married in our backyard.
Oh.
Which is, so we had gone through our financial planning.
I was going to say, from your financial planning aspect, you love that, didn't you?
Well, it was, I did. It was great. So, but we had decided to buy a new house together.
Oh, so smart.
Mostly because the two homes we had couldn't fit everybody.
Hmm.
And we went through and we looked at a lot of homes because our kids at this point were all graduating within a couple of years,
Hmm.
high school, that is.
Yeah.
And we're like, hey, maybe we don't need as much space because they'll kind of, fly the coop
Hmm.
and go off to college and never come back. Yeah, in hindsight, we're glad we didn't do that.
Yes.
We have space for everybody because they do come back.
Hmm. They
And
do.
yep, and that's great. We're still happy to have them.
Yes.
As long as they're launching and moving forward, it works out great for us. And so Kara and her kids moved in. We ended up, because we looked at a lot of homes. We actually brought the kids to a couple after we had whittled it down to
Hmm.
kind of get their input. Not that they had a choice, but we wanted them to feel like they were part of the process
Right.
and that they had some input. Now, Kara and I make the final decision because there's a lot of things the kids don't see, like the finance part
Hmm.
that has to go into it. But we had whittled it down to things that we were interested in and knew would work financially. And then we brought them in because, again, they're all late teens at this point, except for my youngest, who was,
Hmm.
I don't know, 13, something like
Yeah.
that. So they're old enough to be able to have a voice and reason a little bit. So that
Right.
was kind of fun. Anyway, they moved in. Kara and her kids moved in 2019, late 2019. And so they were in there, living in there for, we got married. Well, COVID hit. That kind of messed everything up. So
Yeah.
they were in there 6, 7, 8 months or so before we got married and moved in together.
Okay.
So but it worked out really well. I mean, we had a nice space in our backyard and we were able to invite family and friends and be outside. I mean,
Mhm.
it was hot and humid because we did it in June.
Oh gosh. I
Anyway,
wouldn't even do a June wedding in a church.
yeah, yeah, but we're in Minnesota, so
Oh yeah, yeah.
it's although it was really hot that day, but it's not like the South.
Hmm.
So anyway,
Yeah. I do want to ask you,
sure.
and I didn't think about this. I've never thought about it until I wrote this down because I take notes when we're talking. And you talked about y'all bought a house together and you let the kids have influence. Did your kids have any animosity or her kids have any that they had to leave their previous homes?
I think animosity is a strong word.
Yeah.
I think there was a little bit of apprehension with the change. I would say more for her kids than mine, but that's just my opinion. I've
Right.
never really asked them. I mean, because my kids had moved a couple times while I was a single dad. So I had the kids most of the time.
So
Uh,
your kids weren't leaving the marital home.
no, we had already done that.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. But her kids were.
Right.
And that's where they were. That's where they grew up. She had lived there. Her and her ex-husband had lived there almost 20 years, probably.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
not both of them. They weren't
Right.
married that long, but how long was she there? Now I don't remember. But
The
she
older
was
you get,
there.
the harder it is to.
The kids were there. Her kids were there their entire lives. That's the
Right.
important part. So I think, there was a little bit more apprehension about the change and the uncertainty on top of just the mom's getting remarried. What's that going to mean?
Right.
You
Right.
know? And that was part of the reason why we wanted them why we brought them into the process later after we had done most of our search and whittled down to some things we thought could work. And we wanted them to have some sense of ownership, I guess, in the process and not just that they were just being told what to do,
Right. Did
even
they
though
ha I'm
at the end
sorry.
of the day, they were just going to get told what to do. But, we're
Yeah.
trying to be sensitive to the feelings, right?
Well, when you were talking about that, I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, we would have never been able to do that." if we had bought a house together because we had enough trouble asking the kids what they wanted for dinner. With 5 kids,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
3 wanted one thing, 2 wanted the other. Of course, if you pick the one, the 2, it's just never fair, never fair. And so we just quit asking. We're like, we're
Yeah.
not even asking.
Isn't that true? That was one thing Karen and I learned pretty early, well, about each other for one. We did this study called the SAID study, and I don't remember who it
SAID?
SAID. Yeah, I think it's like I said this, you heard that, or you said this, I heard that.
Oh,
It's
yes. Me and
it,
David talk about that all the time about you hear what I'm not saying.
right. And so we did that pretty early on. Actually, our church did it as a date night, and it's basically a temperament quiz. Like, how are you built? And I'm what we call a diehard red,
A redneck?
task oriented extrovert,
Uh-huh.
and my wife is like the opposite corner. She's a people oriented introvert. And so it's sort of the peacekeeper,
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
me.
and I'm the let's just get it done. Here's what we need to do. So dinner is a great example of we had to learn, and I would just tell her, hey, hon, maybe we just don't give them a choice. Let's just tell them what we're going to do, and we'll take them out. If we're going out to a restaurant or something, we're
Right.
going to eat. Where do you guys want to go? You'll get 5 different choices.
Yep.
you know so but that's important to her, to try and give them some agency and empower them to make some choice. But
Well, they do have a choice of what they want at McDonald's.
right, exactly. Exactly. So it's fun.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I like that you mentioned that study. I'd never heard of it. But David and I talk about this all the time. And it's not just oh, let's park further away. You could use the walk. And I hear you're fat. It's not just that, but it's when you, as a step parent, when you say anything about those step kids, the bio parent hears you're a crappy parent.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly. So we did that for all the kids to figure out. It's basically, what's your communication style? How do you interact with the world?
Right.
And it was eye-opening to me. My stepdaughter's what we call a yellow, or what's called a yellow, people-oriented extrovert. She's very social. I'm social as well, but in a different context. And whereas, like something like this, where we're doing something, we have purpose here together. Oh, I can go on. I get really excited. She's more, hey friends, where do you want to go? It doesn't care as much about what they're doing as opposed to who she's with.
Mm-hmm.
And my daughter is what we call a blue, task-oriented introvert, and they all have different needs and styles. And it was very interesting for me as a
Yeah, it's like your love languages or your personality, oh gosh, my brain just went dead. What is it? The Myers-Briggs.
yes, it's similar to that. I think the premise of this is it's they play, and you'll have to look it up.
Yeah,
I'll
I'm
try to
actually,
I'll find out the details. I just don't remember it off the top of my head. It'll come to me though. But it's a faith-based inventory. How are you created as a temperament? So it's kind of your baseline. Personality is a little bit more nature driven, I guess,
mhm.
or nurture driven, environmental driven, maybe is the right word. But
Well,
yeah, anyway, it was
yeah, that's really good. I actually looked it up. And did you do the book or the workbook with Kathleen Edelman? I
yeah.
said this, you heard that?
Yes, that's
Okay.
exactly what we did. And the kids, Kara and I did it first together, and then we did it with the kids. And I emceed it, and they just laughed when I'd read a question and the answers, and they like, oh, that's Brian, so it was fun.
That's great. I'm gonna have to try that. I'm gonna get David, and actually his kids are coming. You were talking about you look well, what did you say? They come back, but you look forward to it, or I forget exactly how you phrased it.
Yeah.
But David's kids, we've got Three of them and the three grandbabies and the girlfriends, wives,
Oh,
whatever you want to call them. They're all coming Saturday, and we're going to go to the cornfield maze.
oh, fun.
And I'm so excited.
That'll be great. Yeah, we.
And my kid doesn't want to go, but I'm still excited. Yeah.
Um,
But so I remember when the kids were coming back and moving back in because all of them were in the military. So they had that
okay.
transition phase. You can't really find somewhere to live when you're in Germany
Yep.
and
Been there,
moving
done
back.
that.
Yeah. And so it's been interesting. I did have to kick back into Nacho a little harder with a few things, but I'm
Hmm.
glad that I had those tools. But I also was surprised that I enjoyed having them here. It
Yeah.
shocked me.
Kara and I talk about it, about being empty nesters, that it seems like it's coming up pretty quickly. And if I'm honest, and I am honest with her, I look forward to it to some degree.
Right.
But I gotta catch myself because I don't want to wish them away either.
Right.
And I want to savor the time we have together, which she's very good at doing. And that's something she's taught me. Just, hey, slow down a little bit. Let's enjoy what we have here. And it's been great. So I do enjoy that.
And we do. We rush through life so much. During the week, we're rushing for Friday.
Right, exactly.
We wish our lives away. And it's hard not to sometimes because you are like, oh, it's going to be great when we don't have to hear all the noise in the house, but you're going to miss that noise.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. It's you don't know what you got till it's gone, or you don't appreciate what you had.
Yep.
Not saying you want them there all the time, but just, yeah.
Yep. There's a reason those cliches are cliches.
Mm-hmm.
There's some truth to them.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's see. When y'all got married, let me look back. Your stepkids were like 18 and 20. That
That
sound
sounds
about right?
about right.
No. You got
No, no,
married in
no.
20. That's 4
20,
years ago.
yeah. So they
Okay.
were 16,
And 18.
yeah, 16 and 18. Yeah, my stepson was just getting ready to graduate. I think my oldest had just graduated. So her kids fell right 1 year behind each of my older two. And then I've got the younger boy who's a
Right.
couple years younger than my stepdaughter.
So both of you, your older kids are boys.
My bio kid and then my stepson, yep, are boys.
Yep. And
And
then
then,
your daughter and your stepdaughter
exactly.
are 20 and 21. So they're really close in age.
They are. Yeah. And to some extent that helped with the blending initially, and I think COVID helped some too, ironically, because we didn't have anywhere to go.
Right.
So we were at home after the wedding, and there was no choice. Overall, the kids were pretty good and open to the idea of,
Mm-hmm.
of blending and hanging out together and initially, and it went really well, blew our expectations out of the water. Not that I don't know that we ever had any, but because I'm not sure that we really thought about it too much.
Mm-hmm.
Which isn't that story of every blended family's life.
Yeah.
But I would say, and I think maybe we had talked about this a little bit, in the years after, like the most recent years, kids start going away to college, coming back for the summer, maybe, or like my daughter went out to Montana and was gone all year, except for Christmas, would come home. And, it becomes harder to blend. And that's what I was hinting at with my stepmom. She just came into my life where I was moving on to graduating college or high school, sorry. And then really just starting to build my own life. And
Yeah.
so there wasn't a lot of time to blend with her and her two daughters.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, we still see each other occasionally, and it's great. And I consider them my stepsisters, but it's not like I grew up with them. So there just wasn't that opportunity to blend. And so we're experiencing that a little bit, I think right now. And how do we create opportunities to keep it going?
Hmm.
So, but at the same time, you got to recognize they have their own lives and
Right.
will have their own lives. And I mean, I think Kara and I hope that they will rely on each other as family when we're long gone, but that's their choice to make. We just need to set the stage for it to happen, I guess, and
Right.
at least have the opportunity.
Yeah.
So, so we still try to do that. Kara's big, and this was part of our vision, I guess, was making sure that we were using our time and our financial resources to create opportunities for the family to be together.
Hmm.
And no question, it made it easier because they were open to it.
Right.
And so, but there
Now,
have been their share of awkward moments too.
oh,
You
I'm sure.
you start to see sibling rivalries
Yes.
form, and
Yes.
you don't as a parent with your bio kids, you don't. I mean, it happens, right?
Hmm.
But it's interesting watching it happen with older kids.
Right.
You just you're like, huh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, and I know when I started seeing that sibling rivalry with my son and my stepkids, I had to be careful not to intervene because that's how bonds are formed.
Right.
And so I would have to tell myself, he's got this. You can't always protect him if he's at school and somebody's picking on him. As long as it's not quote, quote, bullying, which honestly, if I think back to my life, I don't know that my sister didn't bully me. Back then, we just called it being sisters.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
but I had to tell myself, don't step in, let him handle it. If he needs you, he'll come to you.
Yep. Exactly. It is interesting. I mean, I think of back to when I was a kid and had older siblings. I mean, my oldest brother is 10 years older than me. And then these are my mom's kids from my mom's first marriage. So they're really the family I grew up with,
Hmm.
lived with. So my brother's 10 years old. I have three brothers. They're 10, 9, and 8 years roughly older than me. And then my sister is 5 years older than me. And then my full-blooded younger sister is 3 years younger.
Hmm.
Um, so it's a little bit of a gap. And my mom worked a lot, and sometimes she was a nurse and she worked nights sometimes or late afternoons and stuff. So my older sister raised us a lot. And I remember coming home and I'd have a key, and I'd come home from school, get off the bus, I'd let myself into the house, and that's just how it was.
The good old days.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I mean, we picked on each other. I mean, we were the adults in the room.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Now, did her kids have to change schools?
My wife's kids?
Yes. I'm sorry.
No. So we did change districts technically, but we're right next door. So her kids were driving, so they could just drive to school. Well, actually, we had COVID, so they were online
Hmm.
here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I know every state was different. In Minnesota, it was online a lot, which is a whole nother conversation. And my youngest was just started middle school, but we were out of district. But I would just drive him on my way to work and then coordinate. We had would we have four drivers, I think. So we usually just coordinating who's picking up Sawyer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I mean, also during COVID, it was easy to work from home. So
Now, how often did y'all both have your kids?
at this point when we started dating and got married, her kids were with her pretty much full time.
Hmm.
But they would still go see their dad, but usually for dinner or something one night a week. They didn't do any overnights
Right.
with him anymore. And then I had my kids during the week, and then they would go to their moms on the weekends. And that's changed a few times. It just kind of worked out that way. Technically, we share custody and we get along pretty well. And we just kind of work out the schedule. But she lives in another town. So it wasn't easy to get them back and forth to school.
Right. Yeah.
But I mean, that had its own challenges because when especially with my youngest, going to mom's was a lot of fun. It's time to go to the zoo or the park or play outside, and coming back to dad was, oh, I got to go to school or
Yeah.
so. And then in the summers, we alternate weeks and we make sure we all have some quality time together. That's not just busy, busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, had your ex remarried or her ex remarried?
No, neither had. So my ex-wife is not remarried.
Okay.
Um, I don't know of any relationship there
Mhm.
either. And then my wife's ex, my stepkid's dad,
Mhm.
actually just died almost a year ago suddenly. So
Oh, that's
we
hard.
had a little sad and upheaval there.
Mhm.
It's just really heartbreaking for them.
Yeah. And I think, and I don't know this to be fact, but I think when you're a stepkid, I'm a stepkid now, but my mom and dad split when I was 30, 31.
Okay.
Still, wasn't easy. But I wonder if kids that their parents have divorced or split up, when one dies, if they feel guilty for not spending as much time with the other parent, even though it was out of their control.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that was something Kara and I worried about with her
Yeah.
kids. And I don't know if that hasn't come out directly. I mean, there's no question they miss them and wish it was different.
Right.
But I don't know. They have pretty good heads on their shoulders. But it is something we still watch for,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you just never know how long it takes to grieve. We're all a little bit different. And yeah, that's been an interesting challenge, but they seem to be doing well.
Yeah, and it's amazing the things that will your senses, something will kick you back into that grief mode. I know after my sister died, it was a couple months later, I smelled this smell. And,
Mm.
and before I could recognize the smell, I started crying. And I'm really not a big crier, so it's like, what in the world? Then I realized it was like the carpet freshener I had used to clean her place after she died.
Oh, yeah, and your brain had already built the connection.
Yes, and David was upstairs, and he walks downstairs, and he said, "What is wrong?" And I said, "The smell." He's like, "I did not even think about that. I'm so sorry." And I'm like, "I would have thought about it even if you'd have said anything.
Right,
I just didn't know I would react that way." And it comes and it goes, and I hate it for anybody that experiences it, whether it's I can't imagine a child, but a parent or a sibling, because you'll feel like you're making progress, like, "Okay, I'm getting better, I'm getting stronger. Yes, this still sucks," but then all of a sudden, it feels like it was just yesterday.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think life is a process in some ways that way, where you take two steps forward, but you step back, and in some ways it's nice to have that reminder, but at some point you wish it would stop.
Right, yeah,
You know?
yeah.
It's
Yeah,
like,
you
okay,
you
I'm
wanna
ready.
you wanna remember them, but you don't wanna be sad when you do.
Right, you don't want the pain anymore. And so
Right, yeah. So, when you and Kara got married,
yeah.
you were y'all both kinda the same financially? Like, y'all both made $50,000 a year, you both had $20,000 in savings and $100,000 in retirement?
Not even close. No, very different. I mean, well, I don't know if very different, but she's been at her job for 20 some years and just is very diligent. I'm self-employed, building a business, so I put a lot into that.
Mhm.
And she had stayed in her same home from I can't remember if she had it before she got married the first time or shortly thereafter. I don't know the timeline, but she'd been in there a long time. So I mean, she really appreciates. She's not a risk taker, you know.
Mhm.
So she had more equity in her home than I had because I had moved out of my first marriage home, and so I'd only been in there. I guess well, I'd moved twice actually after that. So that's where I was saying earlier, my kids were kind of used to it. They weren't tied down to a particular home. But and so that created some different. She had more equity in her home, and that's where I think we were talking earlier, that when we decided to buy a home, we used her equity first, because then I stayed where I was until we got married and then sold my house. And then, we had put that in to do some remodeling, we needed an extra room, all that stuff. So there were things, it was not the same.
Mhm.
So there were some differences that we need to deal with. And how do we handle that going forward if something happened to one of us,
Right.
and
Is it she put in 70%, you put in 30%, she's got 2 kids, you got 3. I mean, this can really get convoluted.
right. I mean, the number and every that's one of the things I love about what I do, is that every family is going to be a little bit different, and they're
Mhm.
going to have a different viewpoint on it too, right?
Right.
And that's what I realized with Kara and I when we went through that process and started talking about the money, right? Which you have to do. You can't go into it blind. And I mean, really,
So many people do.
so
Money
many
is a
people,
tough topic.
it is. And that's really our goal, is how do we take the taboo away from it? Because it shouldn't be. If
Right.
you're with somebody you love and trust, you should be able to have tough conversations with them. And we want to give people a framework to do that,
Mhm.
and be a guide to help have that, so you have a framework. Because I just, when we went through it, and you have to realize that you are coming from different places, and that's okay, but how do we bring it together, right? How
Right.
do we merge our stories to whatever extent we want to, that we're comfortable with,
Mhm.
so that we can make decisions together moving forward? And that's really what we did. I mean, we just applied the process that I had been using with clients before, but it was eye-opening when you look at the complexities that a blended family has,
Yes.
and all the different influences out there. And I was like, and having grown up almost my entire life in a blended family, but from a kid's perspective, you have
Right.
no clue. And all of a sudden I was like, how in the world did I miss all of this? It's kind of funny looking back. Boy, kids really are clueless sometimes.
Yes.
But that's not a bad thing, because I don't want my kids to ever have to worry about this stuff necessarily
Yeah.
either, until they need to, right, as an adult. But
Right.
yeah, so we were in pretty different situations, and just the timing of things too. She moved in first, and how do we make that work? Because I still have my home, paying a mortgage on, and so there's just a
And
lot.
that's a lot to that too.
Yeah, there's just different dynamics. But if you can't talk about it, you'll never figure it out, at least, because
Yeah.
it'll become an issue. So yeah, it was sort of an aha moment for me. And then I start looking, is anybody doing this? And there's nobody really. There's no firm, as far as I know, we're the only firm to actually do this. There are other advisors, like you talked about, Michael Van Cleve,
Mhm.
who's doing great research and everything. I'm excited for what he's doing.
Yeah, but he doesn't do one-on-one or anything like that, so
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I mean, he probably will at some. I don't know. I
yeah.
don't. We've talked a little bit about the research he's doing and everything, but I don't know. But yeah, there just isn't, and part of me wonders why. I think the answer to that is because it's not easy. It's hard. You're gonna run into a lot of different situations.
Right.
For me,
That's
I like that, and that's okay. I mean, our core purpose is to help the couple create a unified vision for their future, and then how do we make a plan to make it happen?
right.
Give you
And
that framework to talk about it.
right. Yeah. Because like I said, David and I, it's if David dies before me, kind of the if then statements
Hmm.
is kind of how it needs to be, because if I die before David, the house is irrelevant to me.
Right.
Now, he had said that, Jackson deserves something. So, but that's up to him. I can't require him to do those things.
Right. But you could
And
plan for it though.
yes. Yes. Now, one of the questions I had for Michael was my mom had set up a trust for my niece and nephew, and we found out that it really wasn't set up tightly. It left some room for interpretation, we'll say.
Yeah.
So David and I were talking, and we were like, well, would that go in your will of, oh, if Lori dies before me, then this, if I die before her, then this, or would that go like a trust?
Yeah. So that's a good question. And there are a lot of, it's tough to give you a straight answer.
I know. I like asking you those
So
hard questions.
I know. And that's one of the things I think people maybe don't realize, because the advertisement we're bombarded with is financial planning is all about the numbers.
Mhm.
And that's just not true. Financial planning is really an art form, and there's a lot of different ways to approach things.
Mhm.
And we kind of look, so if you take the old cart before the horse story,
Mhm.
the cart is sort of like the all the tools you have, right? You put all the tools in there. That's all the investments, trusts, insurance, whatever. Those are the things we can use to help make your plan a reality. But first, we have to have a plan,
Mhm.
right? How do we even get to where we want to go? And that's the horse. But even that's not good enough. You actually need the driver, right? Up on the little stagecoach, telling the horse where to go. And
Right.
that's the couple. And so this is how we look at it. We really wear these three hats, and we want to help the couple define where we're going.
Mhm.
Because then we can look and say, how do we get there? The plan.
Yeah,
But
kinda like reverse engineering.
right. Well, it sounds like reverse engineering, but it's actually engineering it the right direction, right?
Right.
Because instead of picking a trust, should I do a trust or a will, or a will and a trust, or should I just give it to them outright? We're actually deciding first what we want to do.
Right.
And
What's
then
the
we
goal?
look and say, how do we get there? And then
Right.
what do we use to get there? So that's why it's a tough question to answer. There's a lot of reasons to use a trust.
Right.
Some of it can be tax savings, some of it can be control. So you can decide who gets what when, you know,
Yeah.
and until you as a couple decide what you really want to accomplish, it's hard to know which direction to go, because then there are all kinds of different types of trusts too.
Right. Yeah, I know.
It's confusing.
It is very confusing, and I know couples that say, like, dad's got land and stuff, and he decides that when he dies, he's not gonna will it to anybody. He's gonna have it in a trust, and the trust pays the property tax, maintenance, all that stuff. And I was like, "Why would somebody do that?" Because that makes the kids not be able to sell it.
Right.
So the kids don't really
Again,
own it, right?
yeah,
But what from my understanding is it's huge tax advantages.
there can be.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know enough about it, but again, that's something that would need to be looked into and researched and figure out how all that works.
Right. And then you go back to bringing that back into a blended family situation. Well, how do we even divide that up?
Right.
What's fair?
Yep.
Sometimes we're stuck with thinking about what's equal, but sometimes equal is not fair.
Right. Yeah.
And um, that's one of those complexities that come with blended families. And especially when you have a couple who, I mean, well, let's face it, I have yet to find a couple that comes in exactly the same financial situation and the same financial beliefs and values.
Yeah.
Well, that just doesn't exist, I don't think. Maybe some closer than others, but you have to go through the process. You have to talk about it first.
Right. And your wife could have easily said, I don't feel comfortable putting more money into this than you. We should do this 50-50.
For sure.
And one thing that David and I did from the beginning was combined our finances. It wasn't even a question.
Yeah.
And of course, we've realized over the years, there have been times that I've had to carry the family and times that he has.
Yep.
And because I could have easily said, oh, no, you got 4 kids. I'm not contributing but to 1/10 of the grocery bill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And for some people that works great. And for others, I had mentioned earlier about how whether we like to admit it or not, a blended family there's some sort of upheaval in the past, divorce or death for at
Hmm.
least one partner, if not both.
Yeah, it's created out of loss.
Yeah. We go through, hopefully, go through a period of regaining our independence,
Hmm.
rebuilding ourselves, taking care of our kids, and the focus all comes inward. And then you meet somebody, fall in love, you get those rose-colored glasses on again, and oh, it's going to be so great. Wait a minute, though. Do I really want? I've spent so many years potentially building up my independence again, and last time that all fell out from under me, and I had to
Hmm.
again. So sometimes you can come in with kind of this protective spirit, and we need to figure that out, and we can build the system. Then how do we manage our day to day that honors both of that, with the idea that hopefully as the relationship evolves, the vision and the system that we're using, the decisions we make, our goals all evolve with it, you know, and that's what we want to help give a framework. How do we work through that and make sure that both couples are on the same page and pulling the same direction?
Right.
Because some people, like Kara and I are a good example. We didn't throw all of our money into one pool.
Hmm.
We did create a pool and said, here's what we're going to do with it. But we still have some of our separate funds that we have transparency, and that's important. Like we
Well,
know how we spend
yeah.
on ourselves, but I like to run. I go run marathons or whatever when I'm healthy.
Yeah.
I racked my knee this year, so that's been off. But and I have some buddies. I have a group that we like to go and run different marathons and stuff. And so that that's part of my personal budget, but she knows all about it.
Right.
And I plan with her on it.
Right.
But I don't expect her to pay for it. And that's just how we've worked it out to
Right.
help honor that need for independence a little bit, but also make sure we're pulling together the same direction.
It's funny. David and I, when we got married, like I said, we combined finances,
Yeah.
but I had a stash that he didn't know about. And the purpose of this stash was because Lori will not be in a situation where she is stuck.
Yeah.
And I had felt that way with my ex, Jackson's dad. And I said, that's not going to happen again. So that stash was, quote, quote, a secret for a little while.
Right.
I didn't feel bad about it because it wasn't like I was using it to buy things I shouldn't. And I mean, I knew eventually I would tell him. Well, then I found out he had his own stash. So here we are. If I would get a bonus at work or something, I'd take it and put it in my stash.
Yeah.
And he would do the same thing. If he got cash for something, put it in the stash. And we laugh because his was more out of issues he had in the past relationships with financial spending, basically, spending money you don't have.
Right.
So that's where his came from. And again, mine came from, if something happens, I'm going to have enough money to take care of me and my baby for 6 months.
Right.
And well, he's not a baby anymore, but still, Lori will have somewhere to go was my whole point. And so we laughed about it. And he's like, well, this is why I did it. And I explained why I did it. And we were fine. We didn't argue about it or anything.
Sure.
And when we were talking to Michael Van Cleve, David brought up the fact that I bought a pair of shoes that's very expensive. And I love these shoes. But what he doesn't realize, I only buy the ones that are on sale. So I'm really saving us money. That's that woman mentality, isn't
Yeah.
it?
I love I love
but
that.
he made a comment to Michael, or Michael brought up financial infidelity, and Dave goes, is that kind of like when your partner buys an expensive pair of shoes and don't tell you about it? I'm like, no. That has nothing to do with this.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, you bring up a point though, having that stash or having your private set of funds is, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No.
And it brings that security. That's what I was talking about earlier. I am a proponent that we're transparent about it though, and that we have some ground rules about how we spend. And that's going to be different for every couple. And
Right.
that's part of our process, is to help work through that. What is our money history? Why is that stash so important? And as you found out, it's different for you, both you and David. You
Mm-hmm.
had different reasons for it, but that
Right.
doesn't make it any less important.
Right.
But bringing that understanding, our hope is that we can bring couples together and get on the same page and understand one another.
Well, and when I think back, I probably didn't say anything to him because of the fact that he could look at that as I didn't have a lot of faith in our marriage.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the case. It was, you never know what's going to happen.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's part of the reason to talk about it. But it's hard because go back to that said study. What are you communicating?
Right.
What are you actually meaning, and how am I understanding it?
Yeah. So have you always been in financial planning?
I have, no, what, 16-ish, 16, 17 years, I guess. But I was a career changer. I was in the Army for a while. I did reserves and I did active duty for a while.
Thank you for your
Back,
service.
thank you. I appreciate that. It always makes me feel a little uncomfortable because I'm a child of the 80s, and since I was 10 years old, I was going into the service.
Yeah.
And it's just, I loved it. It was just part of what I do. But anyway,
Yeah.
and so I did that. That was kind of in the 90s. So definitely a relatively peaceful time.
Hmm. God the world has changed so much since then.
It has. It has. And so, um, and then so I left that and went and worked for a couple of Fortune 500 companies, got my master's in business, and then, ended up in finance. It was something I wanted to do when I came off active duty, but I had a degree in biology and
Those don't
army
relate very
experience.
well.
Yeah. So I
Well,
just,
I don't know. Money's green, plants are green.
yeah. Yeah. So it's been an interest of mine for a long time, but I've been doing it for a long time now. Like I said, 16, I think I'm in 17 years now, going on 17.
Wow.
And blended families. I mean, I've had blended families for that entire time. Some of my first clients were blended families, but it wasn't until Kara and I started going through it 5 years ago that I looked at it with a different lens
Hmm.
and said, this is different. This
Right.
is not the same as the couple next door or the so-called nuclear family.
Hmm.
This is different, and this this needs help. People need help with this. So,
Right. Yeah. I know I told Michael that I'm going to actually talk to the guy that does our financial planning and discuss this with him.
mhm,
Be like, do you understand the difference? And the reason being is when my son's father and I were first going through the court stuff, like I said, we split up before Jackson was born, but we went to an attorney. Very highly recommended, great guy, ex-Marine. I really liked him, but he had no clue about how blended families worked.
right.
He thought that everybody would put what's the best interest of the child at the forefront, and that's not always the case. So,
Absolutely.
I think it's so, so, so very important that you and Michael both have blended family experience so you understand how crazy this is.
Isn't that true?
Yeah, you need, like, multiple flow charts for this.
Yeah. It is fine. I mean, that goes all the way back to, like I said, about my youth and describing my family.
Yes.
And would you say, yeah, I don't need a family tree, I need a forest.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, because I
Sure.
know Michael had said something about a financial therapist.
Yes.
have you came across people, I'm sure you have, but how would you handle this? Say David and I come to you and we are talking about the financial planning aspects, but we just cannot discuss it. We argue about it. We can't come to an agreement about it. And it's getting kind of heated of, well, I think you should leave your life insurance to me because I'll still need help if you die. And he's going, well, I need to leave my life insurance to my kids because they're my concern.
Right.
So when you come with two people that are having conflict of interest, I guess, when discussing the financial planning, how do you handle that? Like, get out of my office right now.
No, 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 no.
Y'all
No,
need help. Please join.
well, first off, I'm not a therapist.
Mhm.
I do talk a lot about values and client beliefs and things. And sometimes clients just they start talking and sharing about their family and it feels like therapy, but I'm not a therapist and I am a big proponent of it.
Right.
I think therapy is great. And that's a situation where trying to think of some examples without sharing, I guess.
Yeah.
So I know there are financial therapists out there.
Mhm.
I don't know, and they're gonna hate me for this. I don't know the benefit versus just regular therapy. I did therapy before I got remarried, and I was amazed by it. In fact, I think you and a guest talked about it a couple podcasts ago about EMDR.
Yes.
Yes, did that.
How did you
That's
feel about
amazing.
that? Did it bring up traumatic stuff for you?
I went to a Christian counselor a couple years after my divorce, in part because I got into a relationship and that ended, and it wasn't a healthy relationship, and I was like, why did I do that?
Mhm.
It just kind of dawned on me as like, I do not understand why I did that. So I just went to a Christian therapist who happened to practice that. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, it did. It brought up a lot from, my parents' divorce and things. And because there was, I think maybe you talked about this before. You probably have. It was in a recent podcast too about, having to choose where you're going to live.
Right.
One of your parents asking you, "I'm 5 years old." I
Yeah.
mean,
You see, I was a daddy's girl, so anytime that was asked to me, I'd be like, "My daddy, my
yeah,
daddy."
yeah. Yeah, but that's just such an unfair question. But I think it's a common, unfortunately, maybe a common question. But
Well, I will tell you that happened once a month throughout my life, and it's
yeah,
because my mom and dad were not on the same financial planning page.
yeah,
Yep, once a month. Who you gonna
yeah,
go live with? Because mama didn't have enough money in her account
yeah.
to pay the car payment and buy school clothes or something like that. It was always something.
That's yeah, that's hard.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if I answered that
No,
question.
no, you did. But
Yeah.
is
I mean, like
any
there are, like I said before, financial planning is an art too. So there are ways to find compromise,
right.
but there are just places where you can't because there's a deep rooted hurt or trauma maybe that somebody needs to deal with that's preventing them from moving forward. And that's when therapy that's not something I can handle, and I'm not trained to do that. So
Well, I feel like we're in therapy because I'm sitting here thinking with my mom and witnessing that growing up, that's probably part of the reason I had a stash too.
it could be
Like, I'm not gonna be dependent on anybody.
right.
I'm not gonna fight once a month with my husband over a car payment or things like that. Yeah,
For sure. I could see that connection.
yeah. Now, but the EMDR, I do have one more question. Is that only to find trauma, or do people see good things when they do this stuff? Do you know?
Hmm. I don't know. I
Okay, I'm gonna
know.
have to find somebody.
Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know that I would say for me that it brought up trauma, but it did bring out the emotion.
Right.
And I think that for me was the freedom,
Yeah.
is that I actually got to process,
Yeah.
Because when you're at 5, you don't know how to process.
Yeah.
And, I grew up well into my teens praying every night for my parents to get back together. Even though my mom had remarried at this point, and I didn't particularly mind my stepdad at this point. And I look back at it now and I'm grateful to have this man in my life. And I've
Hmm.
had him in my life for 30 years or whatever, because he's a blessing to me and my family. So it's funny how childhood works. I mean, so
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I know. I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast with the EMDR, but a friend of mine had done it. And what she saw, I guess, in her head or visualized was she was able to see her mom. And her mom died when she was like 13. So that was very emotional for her. But even more so, it was her dad taking her from her mom.
Yeah.
And like she said, I could see through the top of the door. My dad was holding me and I could see through the top of the door. And I remember seeing my mom sitting there crying.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
hard.
it is. All right. I know you've got to run and I know I could talk to you
You.
forever. Tell people where they can find you.
Yes, my website is EFG. That stands for Endurance Financial Group, efg-planning.com.
Mhm.
And if you go out there, there's a financial planning for blended families. And you can get the ebook if you want that I wrote. That will put you on our newsletter. We only do it once a month. So no spam or anything like that, but you're welcome
Mhm.
to get those resources. I also have some articles out there too
Okay.
for people to reach out.
Okay. Now, one quick question before we let you
Sure.
go. Can anybody from any state contact you?
Yes, for the most part. I mean, we do work with clients in several states. We're registered in Minnesota and Wisconsin currently,
Mhm.
but most states allow us to work with a handful of clients before we need to register. So,
Okay.
well, those are things we'd figure out.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, Brian, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back.
Absolutely.
All right. Well,
I
take
love
care
them.
and keep helping blended families.
Same to you.
Thanks.
Appreciate all you do. Thank you.
Bye bye. We really appreciate Brian being a guest on our podcast. And we know the holidays are coming up, and those can be very stressful for step families. Check out our blogs regarding the holidays and step families. And if you want help, go to nachokidsacademy.com and join the Nacho Kids Academy so we can help you through your journey. All right, folks, that's it for today. Until next time, remember, life is good when you nacho.